a huge part of creating this event and being on some of the Zoom calls with him, seeing how clear and concise and that he joined Christina. So Christopher Life's going to come and speak. Yeah, let's listen up, brother.
Test it. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Christopher Life, and Union. Since I was a child, I've carried a vision that we can live in a beautiful, interconnected world. And I spent my entire child, adolescent, and adult life trying to understand what it would actually take for us to create that outcome. And the more you look out into the world, out at the news and the history, into the forecasts of where we're going, it's hard to imagine that there's a scenario whereby we pull the ship up before it crashes. But I firmly believe that's possible. And I'm certainly willing to give the entirety of my life force energy to exploring what it's actually going to take for us all to rise together at the level of human civilization around the world. That devotion has led me into politics, not because I love manipulation or vying for power, but because politics at the root is about stewardship. It's about actually taking responsibility for the place that we call home. And our governments are a very significant aspect of our lived experience of human civilization, of our homes. And so there's no way that we can actually carry stewardship and a vision for a thriving future without being willing to take responsibility for the existing reality as it is. And so that led on a journey over the last 10 years to understand how do we create systemic transformation at the geopolitical level. You know, I spent years in Africa working in extreme poverty alleviation, just to realize that extreme poverty wasn't just folks that hadn't quite caught up to development, but was actually the result of a geopolitical system that was oppressing people around the world. And turns out that the United States of America was a key part of that system. And so as an American, I realized there's nothing for me to do to try and solve any other problems anywhere else in the world, except for to realize how we go in the center of the belly of our own beast and create transformation totally and completely from the inside out. And that journey has led me to explore and discover various angles on how to approach this practically, tangibly, and strategically to create systemic transformation outcomes in our country. And that led to the formation of the Independent National Union. Slide, please. So let's start with the question, what is a national revolution, right? This is a relevant question because it happens to turn out that our country is currently being controlled by the most sophisticated tyrant the world has ever invented. You know, Americans are like, you know, we're number one. Well, we're number one in creating the most sophisticated tyrant ever, and it's called the duopoly two-party system of political control. And that system has effectively maintained and entrenched its position of power in this country and has systematically turned the public into a mechanism for corporate and private profits. Which has created a tremendous wake of carnage along its way. So that's a problem, and we've got to figure out what to do about that exactly. And the answer to that question is actually we need to take the concept of national revolution extremely seriously. And so I kind of went through the history books to study various different national revolutions because I'm not into buzzwords. So I don't care about national revolution as a buzzword. I want to know it as a technical term. I want to know actually what does it entail for us to conduct an actual national revolution in the United States of America. Turns out that a national revolution is a total and complete transfer of power from those that held power to a new body that holds power going forward. So if the Democrat and Republican duopoly holds power in this country at national, state, and local levels, and the corporations that fund those parties and then the wealthy elite that own those corporations, if that's our lineage of power holding this country, then a national revolution means something other than that is what controls the government going forward. Well, we have to figure out what that something else is. And that's where it comes down to the independent sector in the US. So let's go ahead and press the slide, please. Because the independent sector is the only body, the only context that has the possibility of being able to become a formidable opponent to the duopoly, to actually be that which ensures the transfer of power occurs and that which the transfer of power occurs within. And so I have now become a fervent activist for the independent sector because I really believe it's the only opportunity for this country to be able to rise from the current context that we're in. Who are the independents? Well, we have about 100 million Americans as independents. So boom, you've got your majority. If you put the independents, Republicans, and Democrats side by side, the independents are going to be heads and shoulders above the Republicans and Democrats respectively. So we have the people that are in place there. These are people that register as independents. These are people who are a part of other smaller parties that aren't associated with the Republican Democratic Party. These are hundreds and thousands of champions of democratic reform trying to fight corruption in our country. These are people that are creating alternative solutions, alternative systems of currency, alternative systems of how we think about economics. These are the folks that are not just consuming the existing narratives, but are creating alternative narratives. Independents are perceiving the truth from their own perspective and communicating that, and not being perpetually manipulated by the engineered narratives that were designed to help us to kind of stay inside of our little rat cage here. And so the independent movement, while it includes the registered independents, it's so much bigger than that. And there's so many people that are a part of the independent movement who have never heard the term the independent movement before. But once they start to realize what this movement is, what it stands for, what it entails, people can start to realize, oh, wow, I'm a part of something that 100 million other Americans are a part of, right? So we have the opportunity here to name the movement, to be able to invite people who, whether they know it or not, are a part of something larger than themselves. Because currently, the independent movement isn't formally organized, right? It's all these different small independent parties. It's all these different disconnected reform organizations. It's potentially different media spokespeople and celebrities. But hitherto, we have not had that whole sector come alive as one integrated, cohesive sector of independence until now. Slide, please. So this is our moment in time to be able to activate the United Independent Movement. By me naming the United Independent Movement in this moment, it's becoming more real. And I invite you to hold that message with me as you go out and let people know, yeah, there's an emerging United Independent Movement, and we're a part of it. And independents are coming together to do together what we could never do alone, which is to conduct an actual national revolution to create a post-duopoly United States of America. Now, the left and the right, the Republican and Democratic parties, they use manipulatively social and economic issues as the primary platforms to be able to keep people pitted against each other. So we're focused on the infighting within the country and not thinking about the issues of governance, right? So the topic, the platform of the United Independent Movement is governance itself, okay? So we don't need to actually worry about the social and economic issues as the foundation of our movement. We have to think about, how are we making sense together? How are we deciding who represents the public? How are we holding those representatives accountable? How are we ensuring government transparency? How are we doing voting? How are we doing legislation? How are we digitizing our government? How are we ensuring that we have the best technological solutions in place so we can govern most effectively? These questions of governance
are the questions, are the topic, are the platform of the independent sector. And it just so happens that while social issues and economic issues are inherently polarizing, topics of governance are almost entirely inherently unifying. So if we're talking about a united independent movement, if we're talking about united we stand, we have to be able to rally around topics and principles that are both critical, effective, and unifying. And those are the topics of governance themselves. So we can create governance of, by, and for the people and fulfill the original promise of America. What's the political ideology of the United Independent Movement, of the independent sector? It's not the left. It's not conservatism. It's not the right. It's not the left. It's not liberalism. It's not the right. It's not conservatism. It's the rise. There's actually a new domain of political thought that's neither the left nor the rise. The left and the right. The left and the right do not encompass the totality of potential political ideology. They actually just anchor us into this constant polarized battle as a country. We have the opportunity and need to draw upon our boldness to be able to name a whole new domain of political thought. And we call that the political rise, okay? And the political rise foundationally is about holism. It's about integrating diverse parts, putting diverse perspectives together to synergistically create new wholes, to understand the holism of our populace, to understand the holism of our populace's relationship to our environment, to understand the holism of the planet, of humanity that we share it with, the ecological issues, the systems of this planet, the systems of our economies, the systems of our communities, and even the systems of our own biology, right? So the political rise fundamental ideology is around holism. And so as we bring together a united independent movement premised upon topical focuses around our governance issues, how we run our government, anchored in the political rise ideology of holism, then we now have a movement that has a lot to work with, okay? And what's our agenda? Our agenda is actually a complete transfer of power from the duopoly to the independent sector. There's our revolution. But our agenda is also a rebirth of our democracy. Our agenda is actually a transformation of our democratic processes to live into the potential we've never arrived into yet, which is governance of, by, and for the people. And we now have technological solutions. We now have cultural capacity. We now have a certain level of know-how to be able to create systems of governance that are, in fact, of, by, and for the people. I'm not going to get into detail right now, but that's the opportunity we have right now. And we went through a rebirth 250 years ago from monarchy to democracy. And so there's a transformation of government structure about as significant that's coming ahead as we move into the future as that. And that's from what you might call democracy 1.0 to democracy 2.0. And so the agenda of the United Independent Movement is a rebirth revolution, meaning a full transfer of power, as well as a transformation of how power functions at the municipal, county, state, and national levels. And so now we have this emerging United Independent Movement. You're all a part of it. Welcome to the party. And so now we need to land a couple key aspects of it. And so we formed the Independent National Union to create a coordination vehicle, right? I mentioned before, there's dozens of smaller parties. There's hundreds of reform organizations. There's 100 million American individuals. And so there's so many different players and actors in the independent space. There's not one context to help to coordinate and unify those efforts. And therein was birthed the Independent National Union. I've been fortunate to be executive director of the burgeoning Independent National Union for the last 2 years. And we're putting one foot in front of the next, with this event and this moment in time being our next opportunity to bring this conversation forward and to anchor this emerging narrative of the United Independent Movement as one of the core aspects of programming of the organization itself. Slide. And so what we get to do, what we have to do, what we ought to do is to be able to create for ourselves our own banner, to be able to turn this potential nascent amorphous movement into something crystal clear, right? And so I draw your attention to this flag, both literally and as a metaphor, that once we start to crystallize the narrative of the independent movement, we can start to wave that flag. As we wave that flag, others can start to wave that flag. As more can wave the flag, more can see the flag, right? So we're branding, we're establishing, we're concretizing what's possible, and we're enabling people to participate in identifying as an independent with power, with vision, with inspiration, and with aspiration. So we can tell the story of the rise. We can tell the story of governance of, by, and for the people. Slide, please. So as we crystallize this narrative, we need to broadcast that narrative. And so, as you know, the left and the right, Republican and Democratic parties, their primary form of control is through media and through narrative. So they have copious amounts of media channels, and they have very established and engineered narratives. And there's no way that the independent sector is ever going to be able to compete until we're committed to playing full out at the level of narrative creation, and media distribution. And so there's a call to form all forms of partnerships. There are so many owners of media stations, media channels, radio stations, podcast hosts, online publicists, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And as we come together as a united independent movement, we need to bring our media distribution capacities together, our media creation capacities together to create an independent nation network so we can broadcast the signal and the message of the united independent movement as effectively as the message of the left and the right, which currently barrages our systems of communication across this country. So we have to think at the level of narrative and media distribution, and the ability for people to receive this message day in and day out if this movement has any chance of success. Next, please. Next, we have to be thinking very effectively about local organizing. As many of you know, that this transformation at a national level is completely dependent upon organizing at a local level. So to form contexts and vehicles for independents to find themselves in counties across the nation is really the next step of this movement. As we create local chapters, or what I call local independent civic unions, then we create a context for individuals to come and first and foremost receive the support that they need to become more independent themselves, right? Independence is not just a political identification, it's a way of being. So we need to learn how to become resilient against manipulation. We need to learn how to help our bodies to become independent from other types of forms of addiction and abuse, other types of control from pharmaceutical industries, et cetera. So we first and foremost become independent ourselves. Then we need to be empowered and trained and educated to become more effective as civic stewards, more effective as civic activists, not just people that know how to make signs and get outside in front of City Hall, people who know how to effectively and strategically enact real reform change at a local level. This is very practical stuff. It can be trained effectively and easily. We just need context for people to show up and say, I'm a part of the independent movement. Where do I start? Say, great. Welcome into your local independent civic union. Here's some education. Here's some training. Here's what we're going to be doing next Saturday. Here's how you can be a part of it. And by the way, here's our 4-year roadmap of our full reform process for our local municipalities and counties. You can be a part of it. Okay. So yeah, at the local organizing level, we can empower people individually, empower them in their civic capacities, and we can build communities, build relationships, build rapport. Beyond that, we at the local level begin the reforms at the local level. We create blockchain voting at the local level. We move our government identification, our marriage licenses on as NFTs onto the blockchain, so that distributed systems are what we use to help to establish our identity, not centralized edifices that have previously held the power of providing our identification, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a long laundry list of deep systemic transformations we can enact at the local level once we have a little bit of organization, a little bit of willpower. But those local transformations are able to snowball into local transformations around the areas you're in, and then ultimately at the state level, and then ultimately we go into nation, Congress, White House. And the last aspect of the local organizing is the local organizing becomes the seed for local independent electoral activities, right? If you have Democrats and Republicans controlling your local municipality or your local county, and you have the electoral capacity, meaning you can run a campaign that can put independents into office and replace them, you just effectively conducted a local revolution, right? You've moved power from control, the control of the municipal budgets, from the duopoly system to the independent sector. So we need to become really effective at running local elections to produce those outcomes and systematically decrease the concentration of our government from Republican and Democrat representatives and increase the concentration of our representative officials from independent sector. Next, please. Let's move right along. And so, 1 minute, yep. And so this is our opportunity to start to come together, to bring our voices together, to bring the different pieces of the equation together, right? Different stakeholders, different organizations, different movements in the independent sector. We need to come together and put all the pieces together, not only organizationally, but even ideologically, because the independent sector is full of people that come from different ideological backgrounds, which implies the possibility of a more powerful way of thinking, because we can put together unique insights to create, to enable new and unique insights. So integrated into the United Independent Movement is the ability to integrate diverse pieces that have never been put together before. Next slide, please. And as I'm closing, I just want to formally announce the Independent National Convention. We have, you've heard of the RNC, the Republican National Convention, and the DNC. In 2020, we ran the first independent national convention. So these are part of the steps of legitimizing the sector, of building the sector, of building the identity, of bringing us all under one roof or under one sky. And so in 2022, probably in Austin, Texas, we will be running the second independent national convention. This will be the single largest convergence of the independent sector in the history of this country. So these are the steps that we're taking to build this movement. We'd love for you to be a part of it as we move on. And if you'd like to get more involved with the Independent National Union or follow up with anything that I've said, you can get your phone out right now and you actually text the word RISE to this number right here, and that'll opt you into our text thread. And that's a way for you to start to receive regular communication. So if what I said inspires you and you want to not just have this be a passing thought and you want to loop yourself in, then get your phone out right now. Just text the word RISE to 866-798-1074, press send. You'll be opted in, and that's just our next step. Thank you very much for your time and attention today. You guys got any more than that?